Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to Garbaugust 2023. It's the return from the swampy grave of an event that was started in 2022 by Ollie at Criminale, designed to celebrate trash. We're reading garbage for the month of August, and Garbaugust only has a few more extremely whiffy days to go. So I'm adding a piece of garbage to my night's reading every night so that I can report on it to you. And the piece of garbage that we're talking about today is a novel that came out in the 1980s when all the world made sense. Except for this novel, which really doesn't make sense. This is by an author going by the name of Leslie Hollander, and it's called The Exhibit. And I don't know that Leslie Hollander was the author's real name. I have a suspicion that this was more than one author and that they were working deeply under a pen name. That might excuse. I might understand that because maybe they're ashamed. This is not anything that I would put on my resume. This is a story of a cast of people. There's a sort of a callow, womanizing TV producer named Peter Mandel, and one of his many, many, many flings is with Claudia Bettencourt, who is in sort of a cold, loveless marriage with a psychiatrist. And Peter and Claudia and Charles and Sharon are part of a group of people who are looking at an ancient Egyptian exhibit that has come to New York, and they come up with a plan. They think, well, what if we were to manage to steal some of the ancient Egyptian artifacts that are in this exhibit, and then sell them back to the Egyptian government for a hefty profit through cutouts that would never incriminate us? We could make a tidy bundle. We could all retire easily from this one little crime. And so they do at the beginning of this book. Of course, by page 50 of this thing, all I was thinking about was something that was a decade in the future when this book came out, which is the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum theft in 1990 here in Boston. And the reason I was thinking about it is, of course, because that kind of a plan doesn't work. These things are extremely well known, not as well known as all the stuff that was stolen from the Gardner, but there is no way that you could bring this to any kind of international fence. It could never see the light of day again, including at a fence, including in a third-party cutout. Anyone who put their hands on it would immediately turn you in, rather than risk 70 years in jail themselves. So these kinds of things, they might work if you've got an eccentric art collector who just wants the thing for his basement, as I believe was the ultimate motive for the Gardner Museum theft. I don't think that collector ever got most of the stuff that collector wanted. I think most of the stuff that was stolen from the Gardner was destroyed in transit, accidentally. There were some hard physical objects, metal things and that. They might have lived. But the priceless objects that were stolen, the priceless paintings, I think they're gone forever. That wouldn't be true in this case because the exhibit here is hard physical objects, one of which is a statue of a cat, which ought to signal trouble, since they always do. There's a goddess, an Egyptian goddess, the goddess Sekhmet, who's all over this book as sort of being, well, the exhibit sort of revolves around her, and our characters notice that, but they don't pay much attention to it. They're mainly concerned with stealing these artifacts and then getting away with it. And they seem to do that at first, but then people start to die. And not just people in their little group, an official at the museum, a couple of minor characters. People start to die. And obviously, this is the author here, Leslie Hollander. Let's use the singular for now. Obviously, this is the author meaning to invoke a sort of modern-day version, 70 years, 60 years removed, of the Curse of King Tut. In the first, first 2 decades of the 20th century, there was an idea that went around. It's still common. You can still find people writing books on it today. And that the people, the expedition that opened King Tutankhamun's tomb, were subject to the curse of King Tut. Now there were no curses on Tut's tomb, but it doesn't matter anyway because, say it with me now, curses aren't real. There is no such thing as magic. There is no supernatural. There is no supernatural element to existence. There is none. None of it exists. There are no curses. There is no magic. There is no nothing like that. But people still latched onto it anyway because everybody know the idea of the curse of King Tut was so attractive that everybody noticed when anyone connected with that discovery died, including especially the the British peer who financed the whole thing and who died almost immediately. He was a sickly read. He was going to die almost immediately anyway. He could have opened up that tomb and found a stack of Ethel Merman records. He would still have died. Everything's coming up roses. uh, and the other people who died in connection with that, there were 100 people involved. Exactly the number of people died as you would expect from just a random Poisson distribution curve. There was no curse, in other words. There wasn't even the appearance of one. But I think the author probably had that in mind here. Uh, Nevertheless, Peter feels really alarmed. He feels really alarmed that what's going on here, thinks maybe that he might be next, and he starts to think that maybe Claudia might be the person behind it all. So the whole time that this book is unfolding, it's unfolding on two levels. One is just a normal, thieves falling out. I'm going to make this look like a curse. I'm going to somehow induce heart attacks in people. As Peter points out, when late in the book, he has a confrontation with Claudia's husband and says the drugs you need to induce a coronary in someone are probably right here in this office. That doesn't sit well with the husband, but Peter's worried that he'll be next, and he also points out to Dr. Betancourt that you might be next. So on one level, the whole course of this book, you've got a standard thriller, a suspense novel about who will be the last thief standing, but filtering along throughout, you have the idea that maybe these things are exacting vengeance of their own, that maybe there's a supernatural element involved here. And I guess that's an okay idea. In a horror novel, that probably has been done a million times. That probably would be a good idea. That's not my main problem with this book. My main problem with this book is that it's unbelievably boring. From start to finish, not just in the lead-up chapters that you might expect to be a little slower than the climax, but all through the book. The descriptions, the action descriptions, the scene descriptions, everything, all of it is so boring. Later on in the book, we get introduced to a detective who is investigating this, who refuses to tell people his name. He says, just call me Fred. There's a germ of interest there. Give me 100 more pages about Fred and 100 less pages about the Mexican Avenue bus. I'll be very happy about that, but instead, no. The Detective Fred is only on long enough to be a little bit odd before he gets bumped off. But I want to read you an example of what I'm talking about. I could have picked this from anywhere. Just to show you that I'm not exaggerating, I will pick from, what is this? This is 375 pages long. This is on page 332. So we can expect that the climax is well underway here. From somewhere under Lexington Avenue, it's not the Mexican Avenue bus, it's the Lexington Avenue bus. From somewhere under Lexington Avenue, a subway rumbled to a stop. The doors opened and closed, and it moved on. Thanks. The time was 2:30 a.m. By this hour on a Thursday morning, most bars and restaurants were closed. There were few cars and fewer people to be seen, especially on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. The night was cool, a faint damp mist in the air. It was the kind of night that reminded New Yorkers that they were indeed a seacoast city. The man wearing a tan raincoat mounted the steps to the street. For a moment he paused, breathing heavily from the exertion of the climb. He then ducked into a drugstore doorway, out of the mist, and in order to pull up the collar of his coat and lower the brim of his hat. He was carrying a large corrugated cardboard box, trying to shield it from the dampness. He walked north on Lexington Avenue. The street surface shone as though sprayed with black enamel, reflecting the blurred image of the streetlights and occasional neon signs. He turned and started along 78th Street towards Park Avenue, then climbed the familiar black wrought iron staircase, reached into his raincoat, and extracted a ring with several keys on it. The top lock was the large security type. When it opened, the click seemed to reverberate against the side of the building. The second lock was smaller and quieter. As the door swung open, the detective picked up the cardboard box and stepped into the entrance foyer. And it goes on and on like that. It's 2 more pages before anything comes of any of that. And it goes on and on like that. Even, I don't want to give anything away, not that I think you're ever going to find this book, but the very climax of the book involves the main character and this statue, the Sekhmet statue, the cat statue. And I swear, the confrontation there in the dark of that room all alone The way I read it, and I think it bears reading like that, the way I read it, the main character dies, falls back into a chair, and dies literally of boredom. It goes on and on and on. Is she still alive? Is she not? Is she still alive? Is she dead? Oh, the statue. All right, but is she still alive over there on the chair? She just sort of seeps away, which is what I felt my life doing while I was reading this. So, a perfect Garbaugust choice. This was awful. Absolutely awful. It goes on the discard pile, and we'll see what tonight's trash brings us. Ordinarily, if I'm reading trash for Garbaugust, I want it to keep me interested. I want it to be. This was not fun trash. Boring trash is where it feels like a chore. By the time I was halfway through with this thing, not only did I know exactly what was going to happen, I knew at the halfway point here that the author, Leslie Hollander, as what is your real name, I knew that the author was not going to have the cobbles to pull out the stops on a full supernatural element to this book at the end. And that doesn't happen. It was obvious that wasn't going to happen. It was obvious I'm dealing with a timid author here, and that is very boring. So I might move back to Sword and Sorcery for tonight, get something a little bit more exciting, and Garbaugust on a high note. But that was my trash pickup for today, The Exhibit. I do not recommend. So we'll wrap this up for now. I will see you later. Thank you.